All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's hot topic program, Making Noise and Leaving a Mess. Why did early hominins make stone tools with John Shea? My name is Brianna Pobener, and I'm a paleoanthropologist and educator at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. I'm a brown and gray haired woman in a purple sweater, wearing headphones in front of a Zoom screen with an African savanna photo with grass and an acacia tree behind me. Whether this is your first time joining us for a hot topic or you've attended before, we're so glad to have you here. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes. This discussion offers closed captioning. You can turn the captions on or off via the CC button, which should be located at the bottom of your Zoom interface. We're in a webinar format. We can't see or hear you, so as you have questions, please go ahead and submit them to the Q&A box, which is at the top or bottom of your screen. It looks like two speech bubbles, so we can sort through as many questions as possible. The Q&A time really flies by. The Q&A box is also where we will share our relevant links during the program, so keep an eye out there. We'll start with an opening presentation by our speaker, and then I'll join him here to take your questions. So during the presentation, I'll also write answers to some of your questions, at least any that I can answer, as will another member of our behind the scenes team, Dr. Ryan McCrae. So now I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker. Dr. John Shea is a professor of anthropology at Stony Brook University and a paleoanthropologist who uses archaeological methods to answer questions about human evolution. His main areas of expertise and interest include stone tools, lithic technology, the prehistory of Southwest Asia and Eastern Africa, Pleistocene hominin dispersals, the early evolution of our species, Homo sapiens, Neanderthal extinction, and the evolution of human behavioral variability. He also has side interests, and I think growing interests, in experimental archaeology, primitive or ancestral technology, and wilderness survival skills. His most recent book is The Unstoppable Human Species, Homo sapiens Emergence in Prehistory. And his forthcoming work is entitled Survivor's Story, How Prehistoric Problem Solving Made Us Human. So now I'd like to welcome Dr. Shea to the screen to share his presentation.
All righty. Thank you for coming. Looking forward to sharing my thoughts with you guys. And I'm going to get started. So first thing I need to do is figure out how to share screen. I've told your host I'm very decidedly a low-tech person. Let's see here. System is sharing.
A primitive tech person.
All right, that's it. Share. All right, we're good, I think. And regulate this a bit.
All set. Thank you.
All set. Oh, very good. All right. So making noise and leaving a mess. Boy, I've heard that a lot. So what I'm going to talk about today is essentially a new idea that I have about the motives underlying early hominin stoneworking. So let's get started with the opening question. Why did hominins make stone tools? So there's an archaeological consensus, and that holds that they made these tools for cutting things. Both pre-oral food processing, it's a fancy way of saying cutting things before you put them in your mouth, and for carving tools out of wood or other materials, bone, horn, these sorts of things. But recently, people have discovered there's a lot of evidence for pounding, for percussion, stone on stone or stone on some other substances. Just what those other substances might have been, there's no agreement. Seeds and nuts seem logical sorts of things. The principal evidence for stone tool use in the earlier time ranges comprises cut marks, stone tool cut marks on fossils, and wear traces on stone tools. It looks like a mountain range. It's actually a very high magnification photograph of the edge of a prehistoric stone tool. This damage accumulates with continued use. So, what if we're missing something? Now, I have a long and complex relationship with stone tools. I started making them when I was about 12 or 10 years old, and I've been doing a lot of experimental stoneworking down through the years. I also, in the course of doing that, I've been told many, many times, John, sorry, the accent, John, you're making too much noise and you're leaving a mess behind. I've heard that from my parents. I've heard that from my brothers. I've heard it from my high school teachers. I heard it from my college professors. I heard it from my doctoral advisor, and I even hear it from my colleagues here at Stony Brook. So it's on my mind now and again. But I'm also interested in wilderness survival and search and rescue. These phenomena are things from which we can gain insights. Now, not exactly. People today face different kinds of survival challenges than our ancestors did. Our ancestors probably never even had a word for lost. Think about it. But I want to put this in your mind. Making a mess and noise. Let's keep that in mind because we're going to do a little bit of a digression right here for a moment. How would you fare in a wilderness survival emergency? Now, you'd probably do better than you think you would. If you stay in one place, if you stay warm and hydrated, and most importantly, if you don't drink your own pee or anybody else's, you'll be fine. People will rescue you. So this is something to think about. In a wilderness survival emergency, these are your priorities, and they diverge at about 72 hours. If people know where you are and know when you expect to return, which is a good thing to tell them, then your priorities are first aid. Those are the crises that can emerge. There are things that happen in minutes: airways, circulation, shelter. You've got a few hours before the sun goes down. If you're in a cold environment or you get time to find shelter, do that within a few hours. And water. You can go 3 days without water. It isn't pleasant, and you can't be moving around a lot. But these are your urgent priorities. If you're out there longer than 72 hours and nobody knows where you are, then your next priority is food. You can go 3 weeks without food. Again, it's not pleasant. It's not something you want to do, but it's probably safer to go without food than to do experimental foraging in unfamiliar locations. Moving. Self-rescue, that's an option. But probably the most important one is signaling. Signaling makes all the other problems go away. That's what signaling, being able to successfully signal for help or for rescue, that's of paramount importance. Now, the pictures at the side there, I know I'm lecturing to a Smithsonian audience, so this is for you guys. Those are U.S. astronauts undergoing survival training. The man at the left is the survival instructor. The man in the white shirt is Neil Armstrong. Next to him is former Senator John Glenn. The man with the chin in his hand is Gordo Cooper, and next to him is Scott Carpenter. Those last three are members of the original Mercury 7 astronauts. I think you guys have at least one of their space capsules in the Air and Space Museum. Okay, and the other one is, of course, people learning how to do search and rescue. These are valuable skills. If you spend a lot of time outdoors, this is a good thing. These are good things to learn about. Okay, I want to shift focus here. And focus now on Eastern Africa between 1.5 and 2.5 million years ago. The creatures that were running around this part of the world back then were members of our genus, Homo, and an extinct genus, Paranthropus. It's been in the news quite a bit lately. Some of the major sites that provide evidence from this region are Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, Lake Turkana in northern Kenya, and Kangera, another Kenyan site. Now, the stone tools from this time period are mostly made of quartz and volcanic rocks, and these rocks are not present everywhere, but they're present enough that one doesn't really have to walk very far to find them, 10 kilometers at the most. I've never been in a place in East Africa where I haven't been able to find these kinds of rocks with more than an hour or so walking around. Now, the stone tools from these sites are what I call short, non-hierarchical cores. It's a technical term. In older literature, they would call them pebble cores or choppers, and it's implying one of the conjectural function. Flake, that's a name for a little splinter of rock that's struck off by percussion. And percussive is just another fancy name for a stone tool that's used to hit other stone tools, hammerstone, for example. Now, one of the things that one notices when we excavate these sites, you look at them, is the artifacts are scattered widely over tens of meters of site surfaces. For example, the slide at right shows you Olduvai FLK Zinj, a site that the Leakeys excavated back in the 60s, 50s and 60s. Okay. Now, the consensus view amongst archaeologists holds that hominins made stone tools primarily for use in pre-oral food processing, again, food, and as tools for making other tools. Now, the larger implication of that hypothesis is that change and variability among Pleistocene stone tools result from changes in food processing and changes in non-lithic tool manufacturing. Right? That's a little difficult to test because the food doesn't survive. And the non-lithic tools, they tend to decompose fairly swiftly also. But let's have another look at this evidence. And for your amusement, I put this picture from a textbook. I showed it to my students. I asked them, well, what's wrong with this picture? And the first was, there's no flies. The hominids are still alive. There's no lions. Let's have a little look at the evidence behind the cutting and pounding tools hypothesis. Okay, stone tool cut marks on bone They're uncommon, and that's not for want of looking. People have looked at intensely. Your host, Professor Pobender, did work on this in graduate school for dissertation. People look for cut marks on these bones assiduously, and they just don't find very many of them. Of the tens of thousands of excavated stone tools, I mean, museums full of them, only a few dozen preserve wear traces. Now, from using stone tools, I don't just make them, I also use them. Tools used in butchery and woodworking, they get dull really fast. The grease and oil from the animals and fat on the stone tools diminishes their cutting function very swiftly. And using a sharp stone tool to carve wood, the edges dull really, really fast. I mean, like within seconds. So what people have been doing, what people who use stone tools do is they resharpen the tools. After they get dull, they hit the edge a few times to make the edge sharp again. Resharpening retouch like this is uncommon among stone tools older than 1.7 million years ago. So they were using tools, they just weren't resharpening them. Now, admittedly, these could be preservation issues. Stone surfaces weather, bone degrades. We could be seeing so little of this evidence just because of geological attrition, just because geology subtracts them from the fossil record. But let's get back to that scattering thing. When chimpanzees use stone tools to split nuts, they aggregate them. They take them from where they occur naturally and they put them together near the places where the nuts fall on the ground. When human stone workers, people make stone tools, when they create lithic middens, giant piles of rocks near their places of residence. This makes it easier for them to find replacement tools. If something breaks, they can just look around for a few minutes and there on the giant mountain of flint, there's another piece and they can have at it. These early hominins in Eastern Africa, they're doing things differently. Early hominins scattered stone tools widely across site surfaces. Now, this is kind of a counterintuitive thing to do because in doing this, it actually increases the time they would have to spend to find replacement tools. You're going to spend a lot more time trying to find what you want at a flea market where things scattered and unsorted than you would in a department store where things are organized. These early sites look like they're organized like flea markets, not department stores. So in thinking about stone tools and what may have motivated hominins to make them, I went back to the noise and mess hypothesis. I came up with this noise mess hypothesis. Sorry, misspoke. Naturally fractured rocks with sharp edges occur all over Eastern Africa and in the same sediments as the artifacts do. So they're not making stone tools, fracturing stone tools, because they can't find sharp edges on rocks. Such rocks are every place. So it raises the question, why make artifacts by percussive stoneworking? What's the benefit? I maintain one possibility we haven't thought about is that stoneworking by percussion may be purposeful. They're doing it to create audiovisual signals to other hominins. Percussive stoneworking noise and the mess it creates might not be bugs, they might be features. Okay, percussive stoneworking creates distinctive loud noise. You can hear it from hundreds of meters away. When I've been to places where people are making stone tools for history parks and things, I can hear, those are my people. And it creates indestructible and indisputably anthropogenic or human-made artifacts, or a mess. In many parts of the world, stone artifacts are the first evidence that hominins are present, not hominin fossils. Scattering fractured stone artifacts requires others who are seeking tools, they're looking for replacement tools, to carefully search for them, to inspect the objects they found. They're not all in one pile together, they're scattered. Now, this ensures that any clues in the stone tool designs or in the choice of rocks out of which they made tools, they're going to have time, people are going to have time, or hominins are going to have time to inspect them and to maybe act on those clues. So weathering and sedimentation, sediment deposition, conceal and erase older lithic messages, get it? And this encourages hominins to renew those messages through more stoneworking at or near favored habitation sites. It's like having a self-erasing blackboard. It gets erased every so often, you put new markings on it. Now, humans are the only animals who visually track other animals and who deliberately leave behind artifacts as aids to tracking one another. Can any of you, I can't give a call and response here, but in case you're wondering, that track up at the upper right-hand side, that's a lion track, an African lion. You might not know what it is, but I guarantee you your ancestors did. Those are the ones who could read the tracks. They're the ones who lived long enough and reproduced successfully to become your ancestors. Now, a modern example of such marking is fluorescent plastic flagging tape or trail tape. This brand here. It's actually color-coded. If you know what the different colors mean, you can read the messages. A blue flag means water, a potable water, a green one, non-potable water. Yellow means gas, red means electricity, orange means telecommunications. So the next time you see the guys planting the flags, there's a method to that. Now, if hominins made stone tools as signals to other hominids, what might have been their motives? Okay, were they seeking help? Well, making stone tools in a survival emergency is not a wise move. In fact, it can make things worse. This graph shows This graph shows instances of injuries reported by avocational stoneworkers, people who make stone tools for crafts and hobbies, and I'm part of this study too. Okay, so there's a cost there. The injury costs of flint knapping, injury costs of stoneworking. Maybe they're using the flags maybe they're using the stone tools to mark territory. But every sign we have of these early hominins is that they moved around a lot. And if you think about it, there's nothing really to defend. They're going to make stone tools to mark a carcass. The animal carcass will rot away or be scattered by the carnivores in no time at all. Now, how about signaling to prospective mates and prospective social allies? Making excess quantities of percussively fractured stone is a pro-social act. One spends time and risks injuries for others' benefit. It doesn't take but a few minutes to generate hundreds and hundreds of stone tools. So, this is an insight from wilderness survival. Pro-social groups fare better than lone wolves do in every place we've been able to compare the results. The Donner Party disaster in the 1840s. People who were members of families and larger groups survived more so than the lone and isolated individuals. Nikos Christakis' recent book, Blueprint, documents survivorship from an older study among dozens of 17th century shipwrecks. The groups that remain together and function as groups fare better than the ones where people each person for themselves. And recently, Bob Koster's book, Lost Person Behavior. It's a long-term and encyclopedic study of what people do when they're lost. It shows people who are in groups fare better. In fact, Koster sent me an email yesterday. He said, John, his new study shows that people who are in groups are 4 times more likely to survive and be rescued than people who are lost by themselves. So you think about it, sexual selection, so opportunities to mate, should reward any activity that helps hominins find pro-social individuals, especially if that activity helped them solve other problems at the same time, such as needing cutting and pounding tools. So it's not that they're making stone tools just to signal each other, it's that signaling it rides along with a need for stone cutting and pounding tools. All right. Pretty clearly, and I'm not disputing, hominids made stone tools to cut and to pound things. I hope I persuaded you, or at least got you thinking, that they might have had other motives too, such as signaling to prospective mates and social allies. We do this stuff constantly. Think about it. I'm a college professor. I see this going on in the audience of my lectures all the time. Okay? This behavior had to start somewhere, and I maintained it. Might have started amongst early hominins in Africa between 1.5 and 2.5 million years ago, possibly maybe even a little bit older. Now, the larger implication of this argument, I call it an hypothesis, but I'm not really sure I can prove it to the exclusion of competing arguments or hypotheses. The larger implication is that changes in percussive stoneworking after 1.5 million years ago may result from variability in hominin signaling strategies too. One of the things you learn from making and using stone tools is that you can do pretty much anything with some limits of tool size and tool mass with any stone tool. Now, these are general purpose objects. They're not like the knives and forks and spoons in a formal dining set. You know, they can, with a little bit of strength and ingenuity, you can make them do pretty much anything you want. It may take more time for some tasks than others, but they're not special purpose tools by any means. So I'll leave you with this closing thought. Since you folks are affiliates of the Smithsonian, I hope you come up to New York and visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And when you're there, you can see these artifacts. They're called Handaxes. They started appearing after about 1.5 million years ago. And when I lectured the students in my class, I asked them, could these be prehistoric mate magnets? Now, that's pretty much the end of my presentation. And I want to close to remind you, this is still a work in progress. I don't think the signaling is right yet to the point where I can say prove this to the exclusion of other hypotheses. I'm still working on it, and I of course appreciate any advice, any suggestions that you would have that could move us towards turning this argument, this idea into an honest to God scientific hypothesis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That was really fun. I was deciding when I was going to show this, but I feel like this is the perfect time. So I'm going to hold up
Oh,
a stone tool that you made when we were filming. And I think our behind the scenes team has put a link to this in our Q&A. There's a video that is in our exhibit and also on the Human Origins website that shows you actually making stone tools that we filmed in slow motion so you get a sense of what the process looked like. And you made this for me when we went to your office and your university in New York to film this, and it has a little Shea um, in it, and it looks like maybe those mate signals. But anyway, I have this on my desk. It's one of my treasured fun things in my office. So that was really fun, and I'm gonna jump right into questions. And actually, we've been kind of writing some behind the scenes questions. So I think we're going to start with those. And this is a question for me because I appreciated that you mentioned um, chimpanzees and sort of, their them being kind of models for early hominin tool makers. So I'm curious, do you think they're good models? Do you think they're less good models? What are chimpanzee models most useful for in thinking about maybe like the earliest stone tool making?
one possibility is they speak to shared ancestral abilities.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If chimps do this and humans do this similarly situated with stone, it's reasonable to conclude those activities draw on some ancestral abilities. But
Okay.
okay, but if you're I think that's a sort of strategic model.
Mm-hmm.
They're solving similar problems using similar strategies. Chimpanzees are not our ancestors, and
Right. Mm-hmm.
I don't think they've been doing this stone tool use for very long. The oldest chimpanzee sites in Africa are only about 4,500 years old. That's
Okay.
not a
Mm-hmm.
trivial date. That's the date agriculture sweeps into that part of Africa where chimpanzees live.
Hmm.
Humans start cutting down and burning down forests. Chimpanzees are probably going to have to start exploiting food sources that require more effort, like
Mm-hmm.
stone tools to crack open nuts they would otherwise leave alone. So I think the jury is still out on that, but I think using chimpanzees as a referential model, saying
Mm-hmm.
early hominins were like chimpanzees, no,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just wrong.
No, and that's helpful. And I think, do you think that there's any chance that chimpanzees could have learned stone tool making from humans, like passively observing? I don't know how we would ever figure that out, but
I don't I don't know how you can figure it out, but
yeah.
here's a lesson. They've scientist Nick Toth actually and several others taught a bonobo, a pygmy excuse me, pygmy
Mm-hmm.
chimpanzee how to make stone tools. It took them what 6 months, something like this. It took them a long time.
Mm-hmm.
My students figured out how to do this in 20 minutes or less.
Mm-hmm.
So chimpanzees, and this, I'm not talking about the bonobo just watching people make stone tools. I mean, I'm talking about scientists egging this creature on and trying to get it
Mm.
to make stone tools
Yeah.
like humans do, rather than throwing the rocks at the observers, which is what the chimp wanted to do.
Yeah.
I don't think they could have learned it by watching humans. Humans would have shot them full of arrows the minute they saw them.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I'm going to turn to an audience question from Najes who asks, don't some birds also use stone tools to crack open nuts?
Birds.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I have the seagulls here on the coast in Long Island drop clams onto the blacktop to crack them open, but I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. Um, Here's another behind the scenes question. So sort of thinking about alternative hypotheses for different patterns in stone tool assemblages. Do you think maybe as we get later in time, they could be indicative of like labor specialization or of particular functions? Or, we think about stone tool traditions and they have lots of different names. Like, how do you think when that all that diversity happened, what do you think is going on there?
I think there's a couple of major inflection points. One is about a quarter million years ago. It looks like they
Hmm.
started attaching stone tools to handles, and
Okay.
that imposed some constraints. You can't these big hand axes here. They don't easily lend themselves to being lashed to sticks.
Hmm.
So we see that the big tools kind of vanish and replaced by smaller artifacts. That could reflect hafting and attaching stone
Mm.
tools to handles. In later time ranges, we start seeing the equivalent of like accents. Like I'm from the north part of the country, so we say for groups of people, "you guys," whereas
Hmm.
in the south we'd say "y'all" or "you all," or I guess Cincinnati they could say "yins." We see patterns like that in the stone tools, where they start making different tools in different regions, and just as English changes between the time of Chaucer and Shakespeare and then us, the stone tools start to change and vary in a linguistic kind of way. That
Hmm.
could just mean that these people by this point have acquired spoken language, and their genuine cultures like ones we have are starting to diversify. And if they have speech, they can tell someone in their group, "No, you're doing it wrong. Do it this way."
I really like the analogy of sort of accents and like regional variations in language. I think that's helpful in thinking about all those different stone tool,
Can
traditions.
tell you one thing about these industries and cultures?
Yeah.
They're useless. They're an obstacle. I wrote a book, Stone Tools and Human Evolution, on my shoulder here. You know,
Hmm.
it was a dare. A couple of my physical anthropology colleagues said, "John, you just gave a lecture without using any of those industries and names and cultures. Could you write an entire book about human evolution?" I was like, "Challenge accepted." Oh, no obstacle whatsoever until my editor got the manuscript and said, "You got to put an appendix with these terms in there." I was like, "You could read it." But they
Interesting.
just,
Yeah.
they just, I have a physical anthropology colleague. He refers to them as the archaeology tax and the archaeology tariff. Because if you have to include this stuff in a book about human evolution, you have to explain it with a straight face.
Mm. Okay. Um,
Uh,
I
yeah,
feel no, I have thoughts about like, but can we talk to each other about sort of we know what when you say the name of a stone tool industry, like I have a sense in my head of what it looks like. In some ways, it's like taxonomy, I feel like for, naming species, but yeah,
well, create new names.
yeah. All right, I'm going to turn to actually one person who submitted two questions, and the first one is, Urate asks, could all those stone chip mess sites just be there because early hominins liked the sound for the fun of it, like their stone symphonies?
Yeah, sure. Percussion is universal. Every known human culture uses percussion, even
Mm,
apes do it. There's some of these chimpanzees in West Africa, big rocks, like grapefruit-sized rocks, and they hurl them against trees just for the entertainment value, apparently. You know,
hmm
so and this stone on stone, it travels. You can hear people doing this. I said a couple hundred meters away. That's an
hmm
underestimate. When my students are out here on campus making stone tools, I can hear them 2 buildings away.
mm,
Typing right
yeah.
through some science, like, "Ooh, stone tools. Let's go." There could be, we dance, we make, we perform, we're a very pro-social species like that. We show
hmm
off. There's this
hmm
Christian element to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you have FLK Zinj, a half dozen stone tools with wear traces on them and thousands and thousands and thousands of artifacts.
hmm Same person, second question. Instead of mate magnets, because those tools just be the beginning of showing art, like making objects of beauty just because they're beautiful?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Hmm.
absolutely. Most of these things are grubby little objects, not much bigger than a cell phone, just
Hmm.
easy to hold in the hand. Some of them, these of course, they're in the Metropolitan Museum, so they're ones that are very aesthetically pleasing. Uh,
Hmm.
Yes, certainly. This certainly, that could be a reason why they made some of them. I mean, some of these things are 30, 40 centimeters long. What are we doing with these?
Right. Sort of function versus, yeah, did they have a particular function as opposed to just being showing your skill?
Yeah.
Rosemary asks, is there an unstated assumption that the makers were males interested in attracting females? And do studies of primates speak to any gender differences in tool use?
Okay, a couple of things. First off, in amongst apes, chimpanzees, females tend to excel at the tool use. Both female and male juveniles do a little bit of it, and as the males grow up, they stop. Uh,
Hmm.
Females continue.
I have a question about the use of stone tools. This is a good follow-up from Bill, who asks, can you describe how hand axes were used? I want to laugh and say, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I was going to say you can use them for pretty much anything except fixing an iPhone and opening a beer bottle. But I did open a beer bottle one on a dare once.
I
Um,
was going to say, I bet someone out there could do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
My students love a challenge. Hey, Professor Shea, the police are here again. Yeah, these are probably hand axes are probably a combination of things. They're both a heavy-duty cutting tool in its own right. So think of like a Swiss Army knife with a jagged edge,
Mm,
and also a source of finer cutting tools. You just hit the edge of the hand axe carefully without breaking it, and you can detach smaller flakes. And those can be used for finer cutting. So like the
hmm
small paring knife version of the Swiss Army knife. The reason
hmm
they're probably multi-purpose tools
Okay.
in addition to the whatever signaling function they might have had.
Um, hold on. I'm looking for another question. Oh, so Tad asks, this is only indirectly on point, he says, but since you just mentioned the importance of language, hey, you're doing it wrong. Do evolutionary scientists have a sense of when language first emerged? Do we think it was in our species or earlier?
We do it differently. The other species probably had some vocal communication, and it may have had syntax, it may have had grammar. That's one of these things that doesn't fossilize clearly.
Hmm.
We have these weird shape heads. Now, our upper respiratory tract does this. There's this tight turn there in the back over your esophagus, and that's why people choke and food gets lodged back there. That sharp turn was what allows me to talk like I'm doing now, saying, short little bits of noise, da, 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 like if I didn't
Hmm.
have it, I'd be like singing like in an opera. And oh, it's easy to repeat what I just said. It's not so easy to imitate an operatic singer.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh,
So,
that shift it appears to have evolved amongst early Homo sapiens about a quarter million years ago, and
okay.
amongst other hominids. Other hominids may have vocalized. They may have vocalized with syntax and grammar, but the commitment of changing your upper respiratory tract in a way that can kill you.
Right.
We relied on speech more so than these other creatures did.
Okay. And what evidence is there, do you think, like anatomical evidence for that shift? Like, I'm just trying to, anyway,
Yeah.
get a sense of sort of where that comes from. But yeah, I think that does tend to be a current assumption, is that definitely, or hypothesis, that our species is really the only one that has the kind of language that we think of as language today.
Your correspondent should probably look at a really good book. It's called technical. It's called The Evolution of the Human Head by Daniel Lieberman.
Okay. Oh,
Dan
great.
is
Thank
part of
you.
the subject.
Okay, thank you. So this was a question that I was typing as you were giving your presentation. So you mentioned that there was this sort of shift at about 1.5 million years ago, and maybe that's when kind of the other motives for stone tool making happen. So what else was going on 1.5 million years ago that you think might be correlated to that?
A whole bunch of things,
Okay.
right? Number one, grasslands are starting to expand and forests are shrinking. So it's
Mm-hmm.
changing the habitat. Um, the Panama Canal, Panama Isthmus, basically sealed off a oceanic current that formerly ran through it. So a lot of moisture that would have otherwise landed on Africa wasn't landing there. So Africa is getting more seasonal,
Mm-hmm.
was more open country. Secondly, probably related to this, this species of the genus Homo are starting to have a bipedalism like we have it,
Mm-hmm.
a commitment to terrestrial bipedalism. So basically, they've got large and reinforced hip sockets. They've got long feet with the toes aligned with the other toes. They've got a real
Mm-hmm.
waist, so when they run, they can store energy in their abdomen. They've
Mm-hmm.
got bigger shoulders. Basically, they're starting to look like Olympic runners. Now,
Mm.
it doesn't mean they're running a lot. It means they're walking around a lot. And if you're walking around
Mm-hmm.
a lot, they're going to encounter many opportunities to get their hands on food where stone tools will be helpful. Now, these hand axes, when you look at them, for some reason, this is an obsession with British archaeologists. They measure these things every different way, and they have this database of thousands and thousands of hand axes from 1.5 million years ago up to whenever they stopped making them,
Mm-hmm.
45,000 years ago. When you run the numbers, average length, average width, average thickness, mass, they all converge around the same values as an artifact many of us habitually carry around and use all the time: a cell phone.
Oh, really?
Think about how often do people who have cell phones wander around without their cell phones? Hand axes, an average of size and shape are basically within a few million, I mean, within a couple millimeters of the
Ah.
average of the thousands and thousands of hand axes. So
Mm-hmm.
what's probably going on is these hominins are moving around a lot more. They're hedging their bets. They can't rely on finding a great big pile of flint of flake stone so much.
Mm-hmm.
So they bring the stone with them.
Mm-hmm. So if they're doing that, do you think they were just carrying them in their hands, making things to carry with? What do you think?
Absolutely. If
Yeah.
they're carrying these things, pretty quickly they're going to find out that you slip with things in your hand, you're going to lose fingers, or you're going to cut yourself. So I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely think, but put yourself in their place. You can carry the hand axe, and you can carry some food, but you can't carry the hand axe, some food, and a kid.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, as a mom, I'm like, I can
Oh,
carry a lot of anyway. But
or you
yes,
get
not
the kid
maybe
to
not
carry the
all the
hand axe.
time.
Get the kid to carry the hand axe. Where did you put mommy's hand axe? Left it back by the lion den. You know, they probably had a cordage of some and bags of some sort.
Hmm.
I can't prove it. We might find these things in a waterlogged site someday, but if they do, I won't be surprised.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither, I think. Okay, I'm going to turn to another audience question. This is
All right.
from Jeff. And
Okay.
he asks, is there a sort of evolution of stone tool design over time? Do you think stone tool makers learn from one another that's somehow reflected in that design? And maybe that has to do with the change in use.
Mm. First off, I tell my students, stone tools, they're inanimate objects. They don't evolve. They can change and vary, but they don't evolve.
Hmm.
Behavior can change and vary. And what we're seeing with the stone tools is over a long sweep of time is increasing production complexity. Now, the simplest tools, the simplest ones, they're still there.
Okay.
Somewhere,
Okay.
somewhere in the world right now, as I'm talking, somebody is making stone tools. They're making stone tools not at all, excuse me, not at all different from the ones you find in these 2.5 million-year-old sites.
Okay.
People are also making stone tools that are art objects, even much more complex than the sorts of things in these hand axes. So
Hmm.
what's going on is variation in the peak procedural complexity, and that's substance. Excuse me, that's subject to change and variability. Sometimes it's rewarding to make these fancy artifacts. Other times, the cost exceeds the benefit, and people stick with the simple tools.
Hmm. This is actually kind of an interesting follow-on question, potentially from Gil, who asks, first says, thank you for the fascinating presentation. It's very interesting that more pristine stone tools are much more numerous than those with wear. Are
Well,
there examples from later cultures where mate magnet pristine versions of otherwise practical tools or weapons follow a similar pattern?
yes, the simple tools outnumber the more complex ones by multiple orders of magnitude always, in all
Mm-hmm.
time periods. The
Mm-hmm.
number to make a gunflint, the sorts of gunflints they used in a Revolutionary War. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of little chips thrown away and stacked up in the flint knappers' workshops for every single gunflint that actually saw service as a part of a firearm. So this is the consistent pattern. The simple, pristine pieces always outnumber the more complex ones, with few exceptions. And these are places where people put themselves on islands or in places where there isn't such stone, like in sand deserts, like in the empty quarter in Saudi Arabia or the Nefud Desert, again, in Saudi Arabia, in some parts of North Africa where there's big sif dunes or sand dunes.
Hmm.
Those sites, people resharpen everything down to nothing. But again, the one common pattern is the heavily modified pieces are rare. The pristine ones, as you call them, they're the majority.
Huh. Um, this is a behind the scenes question. So it's interesting how your hypothesis focuses on the process rather than the product. And so this is a perspective that can often be overlooked in archaeology. Are there any other aspects of your research or human origins more broadly where you think scientists that we should focus more on process than product in how
Hmm.
we frame our questions?
Yeah, I think one of the things we haven't really got our heads around so much is that rocks contain information about geography. So,
Hmm.
if you know a landscape, if you know a landscape well, and you see a certain sort of stone, you can say, okay, that came from, all right, that came from that source, or this came from some other source. And that's something that, yes, you can study it, but you have to ask yourself, all right, rocks are common here. Why are they importing rocks from hundreds of miles away?
Mm-hmm.
Where I grew up in Massachusetts, there's a Clovis era site called Bull Brook. It's in Ipswich, just up in Cape Ann. When they excavated it and they showed the artifacts in the Peabody Museum in Essex, I went in, I looked. I, this rock is from central Maine. This rock is from Pennsylvania. This one is from upstate New York. This one is from New Jersey. If you know the regional geology, you can see these guys are in touch with a wide range of sources, and
Hmm.
they don't need to be. This rock's right there. 10 miles away in Salem, excuse me, Marblehead, there's a perfectly good stone, and the people at Millbrook used it. But they're also hauling these rocks across a glacial landscape. So there's something else going on there. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the choice of materials may be informative. Now, there is a hint of this in Olduvai, and I felt
Okay.
at the DK, like Dona Karan, no connection,
Mm-hmm.
DK site. There's an outcropping of basalt, this little ring, and it looks like it's an outcrop that they may have hacked away at it a little bit. But there's also little bits of this shiny white quartz that comes from a more distant source. So they didn't need to drag that quartz there and hammer it to splinters, which they did, um, but they did.
Hmm.
One would think it's only a few kilometers away. Any hominins running around with the Olduvai Paleo Lake would say, "Oh, that's that kind of, well, who knows what they think, but that kind of rock from over there. This kind of rock, not from here."
Mm-hmm. And do you think they were, transporting that rock because it made better tools, it held a better edge, it was just prettier, like
Shiny
any of
object.
the, yeah, shiny object, shiny object, the shiny
Oh,
object hypothesis.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a story. One of my students, a story I don't want to tell. But even apes have preferences over different sorts of rocks. And with some of my primatologist colleagues, it presented these captive animals that still do nut cracking or sort of thing with different sorts of rocks, and they consistently choose the flint. There's no flint where the chimpanzees live.
Hmm.
It's shiny. The other rocks are kind of dull, grubby little things. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
magpies pick up shiny objects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Of thinking just really about like the texture and
Yeah.
sort of yeah, surface appearance. Um, this is more of a comment from Mary, who said, I've been intrigued by the aesthetics of two-axis symmetry in stone tools that are not projectiles, more for aesthetics than function. And your point about signaling is the explanation. So, um,
You got to be careful. You got to be careful with signaling. It's
yeah,
it's an explanation for everything that by its very nature can be an explanation for nothing. If something can be
okay.
a signal and anything can be a signal,
Mm, right.
that's why I say I'm really hesitant about claiming this is a hypothesis because it's impossible to prove wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not an hypothesis.
Right.
So it's like I said, it it's not all about symmetry. If your
Mm-hmm.
questioner wants to see what the over the top stoneworking, um, Maya, like the Central American people,
Mm-hmm.
effigy flints, like the ones from Copan or
Mm-hmm.
Tikal. They're nuts, but they're not
Hmm.
symmetrical.
Yeah. Ah, cool. Thank you. I think we've gotten through all of the audience questions, and we just have one more behind the scenes question left, which is what first got you interested in stone tools and other things to do with archaeology, and what has kept you in the field all this time?
You can see if I have the book. One second.
Hmm.
Yeah. This book got me into it.
Oh, fantastic.
Time life. It was 1968, 69. It was a blizzard, and we were snowed in for about 5 days. And just before the storm hit, the accent's coming back, so I'm talking
I
back
can
home.
hear it.
Yeah. My parents had subscribed to this Time Life Nature series, and the book would come like once a month or something. And this arrived just before the snow did. So we're snowed in. I opened the book. I look at the pictures, and there was somewhere in here a picture of Louis Leakey making tools, or these conjectures about how they used the tools. Anyway, it's in the book. Um, as soon as we could get through the snow, I went over to my neighbors who were, retired school teachers, Mr. and Mrs. McKee, basically my foster parents. And I said, Mr. and Mrs. McKee, I want to learn more about this. And they gave me books and they introduced me to people who knew more about it. As soon as it thawed, I went out and said, I'm going to make stone tools. It looks easy. Bangity, 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 bang. Many band-aids later, I go, this isn't easy. You need the right kind of rocks. So it was fun. I went away from it. You turn a teenage boy, your interests track otherwise. And then, to college. And I was talking to one of my professors at BU, and he was explaining something about stone tools, and I said, "Oh, no, that's not the way they made them. They did something different." He said, "Well, how do you know?" I said, "Watch this." So I got my hands on obsidian, and my father used to joke. He said, "John, you're never going to get into Harvard making stone tools." A few years later, I encountered a fellow named Glenn Isaac, was really interested in stone tools and early hominin behavior and all these kinds of things. And he'd taken up a position at Harvard University. I was living a mile down the street. So my fiance at the time said, John, just go meet him. Bring some of the stone tools. And I walked into Isaac's office, and he said, "Well, John, I've heard about this. You and your stone tools, and you're a flint knapper." And I said, "Well, I can make stone tools, Professor Isaac, sir." And he said, "Well, did you bring any of your wares?" I had this satchel, a toolbox thing. I said, "Well, I did, Professor Isaac. I was down in Belize working on an expedition. I made some tools up there. Would you like to see them?" He said, "Oh, yes." I opened the bag, looked at a Handaxe, and these tang blades and these imitations of Maya artifacts and what I imagined Ice Age artifacts looked like. And his eyebrows looked. Right, John, we're going down the hallway and get you an application. And he got me a scholarship. So
That's a wonderful story.
yeah,
I love that.
yeah, it's always been, I love to do things with my hands. I like doing things outdoors. Go figure I became an archaeologist, but I don't imagine that making these tools puts me in the place of these prehistoric humans, but it's a good source of hypotheses. You know,
Hmm.
honest to God, it was a scientific meeting, and they had all these little rocks that looked like they'd been obsessively pecked at, and hit again and again and again and again and again to no obvious purpose. And my colleagues are coming up with, "Oh, this is obsessive flint napping. This is some weird kind of symbolic behavior." And I just sitting there, I thought, "You guys don't have kids. This is children." My biggest skeptic was old Professor Yosef, my eventual thesis advisor. He said, "This is not right. This is some very strange thing that the Neanderthals do." He said, "Loan me your daughter." And so I'd been babysitting for her before. So she and I were out, in front of the cave. And I said, "Daphne, do this. Make stone tools. We show Daddy. You bangity, bangity, bang, bang, bang. We go to the cave and show her. "Do these look familiar?" "These are just like the tools we find in this part of the cave." Said, "That's the children's playroom."
That's great. Actually, I have two more questions that have come in, and one of them is a great follow-on to this. So Urate asks, are Neanderthal sites as messy as Homo sapiens stone tool sites? Or I guess, do you see any differences in sort of the, I don't know, messiness or something like that?
Neanderthals, they just threw their stuff every place. Yeah. The shiny objects, the bigger tools, the ones that are made of exotic rocks, they tend to be out in the front of the cave. Everything else they just
Huh.
into the back. I mean, this is the sites where I don't generalize all of them. This is
Mm-hmm.
one documented at some sites in what's it called? Combe Grenelle in France, and it
Mm-hmm.
appears to be a pattern we see at Kabar. It may not repeat itself at other sites, but Homo sapiens sites that are of the same age as the Neanderthal sites,
Mm-hmm.
same sort of thing, just everywhere.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
there's no clear pattern, but you know, after Neanderthals are gone, the human sites have more structure. So something's going on with humans after the Neanderthals are off the stage.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
But it has nothing to
Huh.
do with it as it's like electricity. It's something that's happened long after Neanderthals vanished. So it's not like you can say, well, humans have electricity and Neanderthals don't.
Okay.
Even
Huh.
though it's truth.
And I think this may be our last question from Rosemary, who asks, do you have a personal preference for the type of rock that you like to work with?
I like a challenge. Yeah. I like that black rhyolite from Marblehead, Massachusetts. That's the stuff I learned on. It's wicked tough. It's very tough. It's black. It's got phenocryst. It's ugly, but you can do some fancy things with it. We find beautiful artifacts that the Native Americans, the Pennacook people lived there, made, and it's very tough. Like I say, I like a challenge.
I
Obsidian,
like that.
Obsidian's easy. Everybody Flint. Oh, Flint. The reason people like obsidian and Flint is as people like me get older, your hands start to hurt. And so the forceful pounding, if you're doing this once a month, a year, it's not a big deal. But a lot of these guys, craft and hobby flint knappers, they do this stuff every day.
Mm,
So you can see why, if that's your thing, if you're doing this every single day, you want a rock that breaks more easily. Whereas, if you only do it occasionally, it's fun to experiment. And like I say, I like a challenge.
all right, excellent. I think we're going to wrap up. That was great. So we'll conclude today's virtual program. Please join me in thanking John for sharing his work with us. I'd also like to give special thanks to those who made this program possible, to our behind the scenes team who helped sort through your questions, including Dr. Ryan McRae, to our donors, volunteers, and viewers like you. And finally, to all our partners who help us reach, educate, and empower millions of people around the world today and every day, we thank you. So please stay tuned and check your email for information about December's Hot Topic webinar, which will be on December 18th with Dr. David Straight from Washington University. We'll soon send information to you directly about that. And we've put a link in the Q&A where you can find more information about our upcoming programs and how to sign up for the museum's weekly e-newsletter. That's really the best way to stay informed about upcoming programs and learn more about the museum's research and exhibits. After this webinar ends in a moment, you'll see a survey pop up asking for some feedback about the program. Please take a moment to respond. We're very curious to know what topics you might be interested in seeing for future programs, and we appreciate your input. Again, thank you to Dr. Shea. Thank you to the audience, and we will see you next month.